Welcome to this episode on All Things Locks. I'm co-host Antonio Garcia. I'm here with Dan Neissany. We have a treat for you today. We have investor, entrepreneur, co-founder of Foodie Fit. We have Andrew Kowal on the show today. We're pretty fired up. Andrew, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me, guys.
Yeah.
I'm really stoked to be here.
Yes. So we got connected just like in a city like Las Vegas. Just everybody kind of knows one another. It's one of those interesting cities, and I wanted to kind of hear from you. You being a co-founder of Foodie Fit, investor, entrepreneur, like what are you seeing with the city of Vegas, and also are you from here? What's your kind of whole background?
Yeah, so I grew up in San Diego, love California, ended up going to school in Santa Barbara. After school, I kind of realized that I would never be able to afford a house there.
Yeah.
And at the time I was working at a bar. And I said, well, maybe I'll stay in this kind of nightlife bar thing. And the next natural progression in that is let's go to Vegas. So I moved to Vegas.
Yeah,
right?
Naturally. Yeah.
Yeah. So I moved to Vegas, kind of on a whim. My friends all thought I was crazy. And my first job here was bartender. And then I kind of worked my way up from bartender to operations manager before I finally decided to kind of venture out on my own and start Foodie Fit. Mm-hmm. And that really stemmed from a personal need. I can't cook to save my life. I am the worst. Keep me out of the kitchen. I think I've probably cooked a full meal 3 times in the past 10 years. And
oh, wow.
And part of that stemmed from like I don't enjoy it. I have so much other stuff to do. And so I was really looking for another avenue of getting food, and nothing existing kind of met that need. Mm-hmm. So I said, okay, I'll do it myself then.
Dude, it's so cool because I've been going there for a while, and like I'll walk in and there's like a cop and like 3 executives. I think a nun was in there, and it's just so many different people, and they're just it's such an interesting concept. So just for the people at home, like what is Foodie Fit? Explain it, and just kind of give like a big overview of what that is. Yeah,
so we are a meal prep company from its core, except we kind of look at things a little differently. So it's ready-made meals. You can get them delivered to your house. You can order online, pick up in a store. We also have 3 retail locations in Vegas. So it's kind of like grocery shopping. You just go in, grab the meals for the week off the shelf, and you're ready to go. And kind of what you said, right? You have so many different people in there. When we first started, we thought it was going to be all health nuts and bodybuilders. And as we've really dug into it and started testing the market, we said, no, there's a mass market need for this.
Yeah, everyone eats food.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Yeah, right? Everyone eats meatballs.
And it's part of the business model, right? It's like people want healthy food, convenient, that doesn't taste bad. And so I am so blessed with the chef that we have because he came from a really heavy culinary background, former sous chef at Charlie Palmer, 4 Seasons. And he kind of got into this business because he made food for himself and lost a bunch of weight and got healthy and said, this is something I want to do with other people. And then I joined up with him about 6 months after he went on that venture, and kind of the rest is history.
Mm-hmm. So when you started out, like I'm thinking like a very specific demographic, right? Like that healthy person between this age and age. Like how does that change over time? Everybody has like their ideal customer, profile, so to speak, and you're like, we're serving everybody. So how does that actually change your business approach, if any?
Yeah. So the first year we knew like we're not going to make money. Let's just go after data. And so we used to rotate the menu every single week. Just trying things, throwing things at the wall, seeing what stuck. And as we kind of grew, we do have kind of these, I guess you can call them, avatars of who our ideal customers are, which is based off of some market research we've done recently. And we message to them because we know those are the advocates of us, and they will spread the word to other people that maybe aren't in that target audience.
Very interesting. So does that change then your marketing thing? Like, are you just you definitely sounds like you're going after like a lot of like referrals kind of thing, right? Like spread the word, so to speak. But how does that actually change your marketing approach, if any?
Yeah. So, I think when we're scaling so fast that you're kind of always having to pivot. And so I'm an operator through and through, and I enjoy looking internally. And that's one thing that I need to get better at is looking externally. And so we have a really good marketing team, and we're actually on Wednesday have a new marketing strategy meeting. Where we're kind of shifting our focus. We call it like random acts of marketing to more of a focused marketing effort. And so we've been fortunate enough where we haven't really had to rely on kind of traditional marketing sense, where most of our business comes from referrals, which is a great thing. But we know as we scale, there's definitely going to be more intentional marketing efforts and bigger branding efforts as we kind of take this into the future.
If I could just like, I don't want to spend like the whole hour on marketing, but it's like an interesting point. Like when you talk about traditional marketing, like ad spend, things like that, and
Mhm.
you're doing it a little bit differently that a lot of businesses don't. So, what has to be done on a day to day basis for a business not to thrive on traditional marketing and to be able to do it almost like a grassroots kind of approach?
Yeah, so we actually, my business partner Alex was really good at this. He's one of the best people at building and maintaining relationships. And so what we do is, really try to partner with other people that have a lot of affinity to our business. Whether it be personal trainers, gym owners, whatever it might be. And we really try to create partnerships with them that drives a lot of referral uh, to us. We actually just have a new position that we started about 6 months ago now, a community manager, where their only job is to go out into the community. They do, community events. They'll do, we call like lunch and learns. We'll go into businesses. We'll get lunch for them for the day, kind of tell them about the business. So it's really just kind of getting out there and talking to people and maintaining relationships, following up. Hey, how you doing? I'm not so good at that. I'll be honest. It's like one of my weaknesses, but I have a really good team between Alex and Priscilla who run that kind of department. I really lean on them heavily for that.
So you mentioned Alex being one of the partners, and also I believe you said Beau
Mhm.
was another one. Shout out to Alex and Beau. So when you're saying like, hey, I'm an operator through and through, but this other person, Alex, is really great at developing, maintaining, nurturing, cultivating relationships. Beau, I'm sure he has his, or she has his,
Yeah.
okay, has his set of skills too. When partners come together, talk to us a little bit about when there's alignment and opposing views. And I've noticed different organizations have like almost a different agenda or different methodology of like, this is what I personally believe. Like Andrew, I believe this is the direction we need to go. Beau is like, that's dog shit. Like we're going to die. It's going to completely implode the business. And Alex is like, I'm in the middle. So how do you kind of negotiate through that with three partners?
Yeah,
What's that process like for you?
it's difficult, right? And so when we look at kind of decision making in the whole company, we try to make it a very flat organization. So
What do you mean by that? Like flat
so
organization.
people can make decisions on their own. They don't need to go through me, right? And they can work with the other parties involved. They don't need a lot of approvals. And part of that is we want to stay agile as we grow. And so at the top, we kind of just have alignment around the values. And I'm CEO, so I can have ultimate say. But at the end of the day, I get outvoted all the time on stuff. And that used to kind of upset me in a sense where everyone doesn't agree with me. But the more I really thought about it and I journaled about this, try to figure out how to make sense of this is if everyone is disagreeing with me and speaking up, then I'm doing my job well, right? Because it means people are comfortable enough to express their opinions, work through problems, and I don't need to rule with an iron fist, and I have to entertain the idea that I'm not always right,
Yeah.
which I often am not.
Crazy. I would say that it's funny, like when you talk to really mature CEOs and really seasoned like veteran like business owners, I feel like that's something that people tend to learn kind of later on in life. What is it that kind of made you realize that, I would say, earlier in life as kind of a younger CEO?
You know,
Because that's an ego quieting type of,
yeah. So
that's a mindset thing.
I stole the idea from Ray Dalio, who's the founder of Bridgewater, which they've been, commented on their culture. And he actually wrote a book called Principles, which
Yeah.
is kind of his journal essentially. And so I adopted actually that same methodology. So I do a lot of self-reflection. And so I have a system, because I'm a systems guy, of journaling, right? So if something caused me stress, anxiety, any sort of negative emotion, I kind of write down a generalization of what that thing is. Maybe it's two employees can't see eye to eye. And then I write down my principles or my way of thinking about the best way to deal with this thing. And then I kind of write down how I'm going to go about doing this. It plays out, and then I go back and I reflect on how it played out, good or bad, and then I develop new principles I can apply moving forward. So I myself have kind of a book of principles that when something comes up, I say, oh, this has happened before. And I can go back and reference all the times this has happened, everything I've learned from that decision, and apply it moving forward. And so I think really it's self-awareness. And one of the things that I learned from journaling too was don't try to fix yourself of your shortcomings. That's very inefficient, right? You can't change temperament easily.
Mm-hmm.
But you can create systems and guardrails for yourself of where your shortcomings are. So I have a tendency to act too slowly. Alex, my partner, will act too fast,
Just
right?
fly off the
So
rails,
it's his job to say go when we're at 80% because I'll wait till 100%, right? And so we kind of set up these systems of decision making and action based on kind of all of our own self-awareness of where our shortcomings are. And that's just, I think, I got it through journaling, but it's really just kind of being self-aware.
How's that style of management, though, helped you guys actually grow and scale? Because I know there's going to be a lot of people out there say, sounds good, but there ultimately should be one person just to kind of put the hammer down and make the decision. So how has that actually helped you guys move? Because you said it helps you move, stay agile and move a little bit quicker. How's that actually done that and not created some issues potentially?
I mean, there's always going to be issues. But the one rule I have is the only time I will veto if I think a decision is made that goes against our values, mission, or vision. If it violates one of those, then I will veto. If not, then if I'm in a room filled with credible people and they all disagree with me, I have to realize that I'm probably wrong.
What actually allowed you guys to adopt that model, though?
So the one thing I think the mistake we made kind of early on in the business is we weren't intentional enough with the culture, right? We weren't screaming it from the rooftops, and we didn't have it, on boards everywhere, and didn't have a lot of, rituals around it. Because when we were small, the culture would sit down and clock in, would sit down next to you every day, clock in, and work with you. And as we grew from 3 employees to 140 across 5 locations, we kind of got a late start on that. And so part of it is, I think, just constantly reinforcing it through myself. The one thing that we need to get better on is actually having systems of ritualization around those things. So we do have like a system if you don't agree with somebody of how to escalate, and then we will kind of reground everyone with context, saying, here's the rules of engagement. This is the culture we believe in, right? It's candor, it's being open, it's being open-minded. And so we do have some set rules around that stuff, but it's something we could definitely improve on.
It's so interesting, like how when you're looking at culture, that there's some teams that they're just made out of that right stuff, or they just have that. It's just a really good mindset where they can click and get it to another level, like in literally in a handful of weeks. Whereas other teams, even if you're shouting it from the rooftops, like it is like molasses. It's like slow moving. What do you feel like helped you guys make that click from no culture to like raving fans?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you always have a culture, right? It's just, are you going to be intentional about it or not? So a culture will develop, whether you try to, that's what happens, right? Kind of you get your own culture in there. And so for us right now, it's really just trying to always reset context the second you think someone is deterring from the right path. And so, I kind of stole this from Netflix, is at the top, we really control by context, right? So, for example, our time off policy is act in Foodie Fit's best interest, right? If you need a few days off to go recharge and that's what's going to be best for us, then you can do that, right? I'm not going to sit there and track your hours and things like that. Or if we say, hey, practice frugality when you're spending in your departments, right? Maybe they do overspend on something. When they do that, right, you just have to bring them back into the context of what that is. And I think that constant repetitive nature of that is what kind of keeps people on track. And I love it when people say, oh, this customer asked me this, and then I just heard your voice in my head. I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Like that's yes. What I want.
You got to have like my voice in your head, like in front of customers, in your dreams, when you wake up every day. You got to have that.
Yeah.
I kind of want to switch gears with you because when we were talking about culture and talent, and then I heard we were talking a little bit earlier about even subcontractors or working with third party. What's that now that you're building the culture and then you're bringing in other people, like maybe from an agency or from another location, and weaving them into your organization, and even for a short period, what's that vetting process like in working with someone that's outside where it doesn't actually hurt your culture either?
Yeah, so we have quite a few vendors we work with, a lot in marketing, whether it be videographers, things like that. We do have kind of a fractional CMO that we brought in.
Mm-hmm.
I actually have a business coach, kind of CEO coach, who acts as our advisor. And so I think the vetting process, what I like to do is, again, systems guy, I have a scorecard. And so for anyone I hire, whether it be a contractor or a employee, I have a scorecard, and I separate it into kind of priorities, nice to haves, and like hard skills, right? If they're not an A player in any of the priorities, it's an automatic kind of fail. I won't take them on. And then you can kind of negotiate the other things as well. So I like to really say, I like to know what the mission of that position is and what they're trying to accomplish. I like to set usually 3 to 5 outcomes of this, and then kind of the temperament and hard skills. Then I'll just grade and evaluate. and make sure, that way I make sure I don't miss something, right? Because we have a tendency to hire people that are like us,
Yeah.
right?
Very true.
And so my chief of staff, I bring her into interviews all the time. I said, make sure I don't hire another me, because I don't need a me as an HR manager. I need someone who's actually really good with people. And so, I like to have a system for hiring, a system for grading. And that way, nothing gets missed. You don't get overly excited about someone, and you can really do it through a logical, kind of non-emotional lens.
Mm.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, because I think that's one of the hardest things for a company, right? It's like identify the right talent, and like you said, not hiring the same person over and over and over again. So when you're looking at individual, like you said, priorities, what would actually be like a priority for a certain position? Like if you can give like a little example of that, just so if somebody's listening, they're like, all right, what do you mean exactly by that?
Yeah, so a priority, so for example, we're actually hiring a new kind of product development manager. And one of the things they need to do is be very assertive, because they have to work with Chef Beau and push back against him. And so you can be the best administrator in the world, the best chef in the world, but if you're not assertive and willing to push back against him, then you won't be successful in the role, right? So being assertive is a priority. You can have an A on everything else, so you're not assertive, you're gonna fail. And so those are kind of examples of a kind of do or die thing for us.
No, go ahead.
No, you're good. You're good, dude.
So what I'm reading between the lines, do you guys leverage any behavioral assessment tools?
Yeah, so we do DISC assessments.
Yeah.
So we know where our shortcomings are, at least in corporate. As
Yep.
far as if you look at kind of the wheel of personalities, we are a little heavily leaning towards analyzers, so one of the things that we are doing as we bring people in is we do DISC assessments to kind of see where they fit into the puzzle.
What made you decide to go with DISC versus other ones? What was it about that attracted you for Foodie Fit?
Yeah, so Myers-Briggs is good, for example, to know kind of general temperament, but it doesn't really tell you exactly how they're going to operate in the workplace. Where DISC assessments, I think, are one of the best to kind of tell you and give you some insight into how they think in a working environment. Another one we do explore as well is called a team dimension profile, right? So as you work in a team, you're either someone who's a creative, an advancer, a refiner of an idea, or an executor. So we look at that one as like a secondary, because it's good for when you're doing cross-departmental stuff. But we think that DISC is the best assessment for how they'll actually operate in the workplace.
Do you use that at all with regards to promoting people, and like as you're part of a company that's gratefully growing? How do you actually determine like, this person, instead of going outside the company, is it something you try to do internally? And then do you use those assessments as a way to maybe guide, like, all right, is this person going to be good for management or maybe not?
Yeah, I kind of use my own internal mechanism for judging that. So when I'm promoting people, especially from line level into management, the kind of my three criteria is: are you humble, are you hungry, and are you smart, right? Are you humble enough to know as you get into this new role you don't know everything? Are you hungry enough to want to learn everything? And are you smart enough to make the right decisions? And so we kind of use a different mode of thinking when we actually do promotion, because it's less about how you're going to operate in the workplace and how well you're actually going to perform in the role, right? For DISC is how well will you work with different other personalities and things like that. But when you're, for example, getting moved up into management, it's a kind of a different criteria that we look at.
What would you say? What would you say is like the biggest mistake people make when they are promoting people to management? Because that is definitely that's something that like we've talked a lot about. How a lot of people just get promoted based on, they're generating revenue, or they may be a really hard worker, but then they get into the position and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
like I'm not good at managing people. Like, how do you guys actually kind of determine that, or what would you tell that person who's trying to figure out who's good for promotions? What would be the top piece of advice you'd give them?
Yeah, so I kind of stole something from Southwest. So Southwest kind of allows you to try different things for a little bit, and if you don't like it, no problem. Go back to your old position. Kind of, nothing's held against you, and it kind of gives us the ability to test drive them in a role. And so we do use that quite a bit, but really, I think I've been handling line level employees for long enough where I've been able to instill kind of some things to look out for. And so, we want to make sure that as you move into a management role, one, you're a high performer, right, naturally, but it goes beyond that. It's do you hold others accountable around you? Because you don't have to be in a place of authority to be a leader, right? So it's really easy to pick out the leaders of the group and the people that want to follow, and then grant them authority. I think that's the best way to do it.
I love that, man. One thing I was curious on too is what's like next for Foodie Fit? You know, just to cast that vision here a little bit.
Yeah. So, our long-term kind of, we'll call it, plan is really to kind of normalize healthier food. What I mean by that is if we can make food that tastes so good, is so easy to get and affordable, it'll force kind of the rest of the industry to try to conform to be healthier. And so we use that as kind of a basis of what we want to do. What we found out, though, is people want food close to them, right? We compete with a bunch of other online, ship to your front door type places, but we found is people want as fresh food as possible. So if you walk into our store and grab something off the shelf, the food was made within the last 12 hours. And so for us, we want to kind of grow into new markets and take that same model we built here in Vegas and duplicate it, and put kitchens that are local in each community. And because we're so community driven, we think that's really the best way to go because it really gets us involved in the community, having those boots on the ground.
Absolutely. Kind of moving into the world of operations, I feel like people that are wired with the mindset to kind of get into that, I feel like it's almost like math or it's like music in a lot of ways where someone just kind of has it or they don't. And when it comes to operations, I feel like that's a place where that's definitely a little bit more of your bread and butter. Would that be ridiculous to say?
Yes, I always say I'm an operator through and through. I love building the machine.
What would you say is kind of some of the harder, like building the machine? I feel like sometimes like people want to impose opinions on something where it's like it's kind of out of their purview, especially on operations. Like, well, I think we should do it this way. We should do it this way, and you're looking at them like, no, like this, like that is the dumbest thing in the history of the world. What's your kind of? I guess it's kind of an open-ended question, but like, how do you view operations? How critical is it for businesses? And do you also have this kind of perspective of like, people should stay in their lane, especially around something as sacred as operations?
I think people should not stay in their lane. And this is actually through journaling as I kind of came to this realization. I used to have this belief that don't come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. And I've since changed my thinking on that, right? Because an accountant can basically maybe find where there's a mess up in the books, but as a CFO is going to know how to fix it. And so some people are just trained to identify problems and they can't actually fix those things. And so really all input is valid because it's all coming from a different place. And so even though someone might not have heavy operational expertise, they're seeing something obviously that you don't, right? And so I think it really comes down to kind of understanding, right? Getting them to understand your line of reasoning, hearing them out so they're heard. So even if you do go with the decision that is counter, or at least they understand and they know that you understood their position and why they were thinking that way. And then that way it kind of helps with their buy-in too, right? So we always say, agreement is optional, commitment is not, right? And we really operate in that ethos where I'll hear you out, I will understand your position, but if we don't go your way or your input isn't taken fully to heart, we're going to be committed to the way we're going. I think it's really about understanding and making sure people get heard.
How did that come about? Agreement is optional, commitment is not.
It kind of goes back to the disagree and commit, right? Because you can have 5 people in a room and 3 people want to go one way, 2 people want to go the other. And the issue that I saw in kind of previous places of employment was when things like that happen, those 2 kind of outliers who didn't get their way won't really get behind the initiative or the thing that you're working on because in the back of their mind, they actually want it to fail so they can look right. And I think, one of the things we always say is leave your ego at the door, right? And ultimately, if there's a win, it's a win on everybody, even if you didn't agree with the decision in the beginning. And that's kind of like one of the things you need to build into culture, right? Is that feeling of being one, even if you don't agree, you're going to get behind that and you're going to push for it. And I think that's really what's helped us too is people are willing to back the horse that they weren't behind originally. And push across the finish line.
How do you guys maintain that mentality through the course of a person's employment, right? Because I'm going to get the sense that it's a very strong emphasis when we're first interviewing people, right? And then they come on board. What is there to make sure, hey, like we don't regress, like we maintain that? Is it, you mentioned about accountability. Is it the rest of the team that does that? Do you need people kind of in that management position to step in, or how does that actually look like for you guys?
Yeah, so in a flat organization, the best mode of operating is through basically peer accountability. And I used to think that you praise publicly and you criticize privately, and I've since changed my opinion on that. You praise publicly, you criticize publicly unless it's something major, like they're going to lose their job. And those kind of things can happen behind closed doors, because ultimately high performers want to know that underperformers are being held accountable, and they don't know that if it's all being always done behind closed doors. And so I think it's one, making sure I'm holding people accountable, but then also getting on my team for making sure they're holding others accountable. And so we actually have a leadership meeting once a week, which we say the purpose of this meeting is cross accountability, right? Did everyone do what they say they're going to do? And it's not necessarily just my job to hold them accountable. It's the peers who maybe operate in different departments or who rely on them that need to hold them accountable as well. And of course that causes tension sometimes. And then it's my job to, act as the mediator in a sense and, realign.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about like conflict resolution, right? It's like that's something a lot of us don't want to do. It's like I don't want to have the hard conversation. So what's your approach to actually doing that? Because that is definitely something that is missing, needs to happen when you're keeping people accountable.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's just, hey, we disagree, we're not getting past this. How do we actually move on? So what's your approach? And just if you again guiding a manager to actually being able to resolve that conflict, what would they do?
Well, I have a system for it. So
of course you do.
Yeah,
yes.
of course.
No way.
So basically, our system is if you have two people that can't see eye to eye on something, if it's a kind of business type decision, it's always each side states their case, and then I will render judgment essentially of which direction we're going. If it's kind of more personal than that, I just act as a referee in a conversation. I sit two people down in a room, and I just set some ground rules of the conversation. And typically the rules are things like you can't attack personally, you can't assume intent, you can't defend your own position. And when you act as a referee and you can't do any of those things, it forces constructive conversations, right? Because I'm not allowed to sit here and say, oh, well, I know this was right and you were wrong and you're a jerk, right? You take all those elements out and you really force them to talk about the issues at hand. And we've had really high success with that because it's not me trying to navigate this thing. It's just sitting two people down in a room, creating the rules around what a productive conversation is. And then, I'll interject if someone's maybe assumes intent, like, oh, when you angrily slam the door, like, rephrase it, right? Go back, right? Throw in the flag.
Yeah.
And we just force them to talk it out together.
There go tech.
Yeah.
This one, yeah.
There has been people who don't want to play by the rules, right? But that's a really good thing to see is in this structured environment, here are the rules. If you don't want to play in the rules, like you're probably in the wrong organization. And it's a way of kind of also finding the outliers of people that aren't going to contribute to the culture that we want.
What's that like? Because it just from a distance, it seems like you have a long leash, like forgiving, right? Or maybe that's completely off. But when it's time to let somebody go, because things are happening, what's that process like with you?
Well, it's never easy, right? And I think ultimately realizing that they're a person, they have a life, they have feelings, and so those things have to be done with a lot of care. I used to hate it, and actually I don't hate it anymore because what I come to realize is.
Do you love it now? Is that?
I
love it.
It's the first thing I wake up
Steve,
to. I hope I get to.
Yeah, meet me at 4:00. You're out of here. You're giving them the cobra. You're out. You're fired. Yeah.
But I think it's like it's if you're in the wrong organization, not only doing the organization a disservice, but you're doing yourself a disservice. Like you won't be successful. You won't learn the things you need to learn. You won't get that promotion you want. You won't grow with the company. And so though it's I guess the immediate reaction is going to be negative for the employee being let go, but at the end of the day, they'll be better off in the long run because they can hopefully join an organization that is better, maybe aligns with their temperament or their skill set better than they have with us.
So there might be somebody watching this and say, look, that sounds amazing, great culture, this and that, but I own a business to make money. How would you say everything you just described with your team, culture, accountability, how has that actually made you guys better on the business side, just from the standpoint of customer service, retention, repeat customers, and just overall helping to grow the company?
Yeah, well, when it comes to scale, right, the idea is to recreate my values into everybody else, right? And so, like they say, like always hear your voice in my head whenever this thing comes up. Oh, I know what Andrew's going to say, and they know the direction to take. And so that helps you become agile, and obviously that lowers the burden of having to kind of go up and over the hierarchy, right? So it's a very efficient system that way when people can think for themselves. But they can only think for themselves if you can vet the fact that they believe what you believe, and that what's important to you is what's important to them. And so there's kind of a difference between values and beliefs, right? So beliefs are the things that you think are true. Values are the things you think are true and important. And so if you can have alignment around those, you can kind of eliminate a lot of middle management in a sense, because everyone will be making the right decisions. And so I think that's what's really helped us grow and kind of keep overhead low. So that's the bottom line side of things. But also there's the quality component, right? Where you need to constantly produce a quality product that scales up. And I think it goes back to the same thing. If they believe what I believe, they will create quality products.
How do you say that it has helped you guys with just innovating? And it's like not just the product, but marketing strategies and like that. Like how is that approach that you guys are taking in the business even helped on that end?
Yeah, so I think it's really just having a diverse group in a room with different opinions. So I have the palate of a 12-year-old. I love burgers
Chicken
and pizza and
nuggets.
chicken nuggets.
Bring in those fish sticks, baby.
Everyone always makes fun
Tartar
of me
sauce.
for it.
Let's go.
It's a little embarrassing. And so we have some people in the company that are absolute foodies. They live to eat.
Yeah.
I eat to live. So we have those differences of opinion. So we actually have a meeting once a week where we get to sit down in a room for an hour and just try all the food that chef is playing with at that time. One of my favorite meetings, obviously, because I get to eat for an hour. But everybody has different input, right? And so all input is valid, because kind of one of our rules is that you're allowed to have as many people in a room in a meeting as long as it's an opposing view. If there's already somebody that holds that view, then there's already one of you in that meeting, right? So it's staying lean, nimble, having as many opposing views as possible. And that's, I think, what's really contributed to always producing a quality product, especially on the kind of product development side, because we come out with 3 or 4 new items every 2 weeks. So it's constantly innovating.
What about the consistency? And, I know the challenges with people when they're growing, they're like, I don't want things to get watered down or start. So how do you actually maintain the consistency and just everything across the board? Not just even like the food, obviously is important, but just, again, the messaging, the day-to-day. How do you guys ensure that?
Yeah, I think culture trumps everything, right? And there's been entire companies built on culture that didn't have a product yet. I mean, look at Sony. When they started the company, they didn't have a product yet. But they had a mission of reindustrializing Japan after World War II. I think their first product was like a heated blanket or something. And so it really, culture trumps everything. And so if they believe what you believe, they will continue to produce quality products. But obviously, I know that's kind of fluffy. For us, it was technology, right? Is how do I leverage technology to ensure consistency, at least in the product side? Yeah. So we went from, how do I take as much guesswork out of the cooking process as possible, right? How do I systemize everything? A couple of years ago, we hired a QA manager who's really helped create those quality and safety systems. That's all she does, is she comes in, audits systems, creates new ones, constant improvement. And we've grown enough now that, that's a full-time role. But in the beginning, it's hard, right? And I always joke around, we're a company in puberty, right? Everything's changing. You don't know why, right? And for us, it was, really kind of saying, okay, let's mark down kind of the priorities of what's important to the business. Is it to sell? Is it to produce? Is it to track? And we really will look at one of those and only build up one pillar at a time to make sure we don't kind of run ahead of ourselves, right? So we'll say, okay, I need to focus on just the production side and just the quality side. And we'll say marketing, like pull back on the ropes a little bit. We want to focus on this pillar. We'll build that pillar up till we're comfortable and say, okay, marketing, they've increased the systems, right? They can handle more volume. Now it's your job. You go, right? It's okay. Business comes in. Great. Now we look at the administrative side. So we kind of only focus on one pillar at a time, but not to make sure they don't get ahead of each other.
Yeah, keeping a well-balanced company is important versus just like, all right, full steam ahead, and it's like we're not even equipped for it, and
Yeah, and in our business too is tough because it's very capital intensive. Food is just, it's a hard industry, right? It's historically low margins, historically high turnover, and so we have to be a little careful not to run ahead of ourselves. No one really has been able to scale the brick and mortar retail location of meal prep yet. Some have done it, and then they've pulled out of markets or they went bankrupt. It's a tough business. And so one of the things that's hard about food as well is Beau got into this business not because he wanted money, right? He actually took a huge pay cut to cook healthy food. He was an artist that wanted to perfect his craft, and he wanted to, make food. And so we're in an industry where we're competing against some other people and companies who don't care if they make money. They just love cooking. And so it's always going to create a tumultuous environment when you're trying to compete against someone who doesn't care if they make money. And so it's tough. It can be real tough sometimes.
It's interesting because on the other side of that, if you look at some of the humble beginnings of, and obviously they weren't in food prep, but if you look at, the McDonald's of the world, the Taco Bells of the world, that over time they start moving certain ingredients in and out for things that are cheaper, less quality. There's that saying, shrinkflation, where like the Big Mac over time is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. So the balancing act is making sure that like, hey, things are profitable, we're moving, we're scaling, but we're not sacrificing that. Is that also part of the ethos, the mission, the vision? Those are the things you guys talk about too as well? Or
yeah, and we're fortunate enough that we're growing, right? And so as you grow, you have leverage with vendors and things like that. And so we've actually increased our pricing at a slower rate than inflation because, as a kitchen cooks 1,000 meals to 2,000 meals to, I think, last night they cooked 8,000 meals, right? As you do that, you get more efficient and you gain efficiencies through operations, but also you have leverage with your vendors to get better pricing. And so, we don't really have to make those sacrifices as long as we're growing because we can leverage that growth to decrease our cost.
Could you mention that it's tough having brick and mortar for, I think, any store these days, right? It's hard enough brick and mortar, but especially in the food industry. But we were talking at before we even got on about kind of expansion and how to determine like, all right, are we kind of maxed out in this region? So what's some of the thought process or some of the conversations? Because I know it's a challenge for a lot of business owners, right? It's like, do we saturate this market? Have we saturated it? And then how to determine to kind of start spreading out. So what are some of the conversations that you guys have maybe had around like, keep it in Vegas, expand outside of Vegas, and now we're not a local business? So like, what's your thoughts there?
Yeah. So when people try to give me input on, whether we should continue growing in Vegas or look for new markets, I always say, God, we trust, everyone else bring data, right? And so for us, it's really about making making data-driven decisions.
Say that 15 times. Yeah, say that 15 times. Yeah.
And so for us, we spend a lot of the first few months of the year really pushing to get data, doing surveys, using other companies to place our data and things like that. And so for us, when it comes to kind of at least growth in Las Vegas, it's really about data-driven decisions, right? Of really doing the math. I've been horrible at judging the market size here. I've struck out quite a few times. We're actually on our 4th rendition of a kitchen. So when we first started, it was really kind of a pilot. And then we said, okay, we're going to expand our first store, get a new kitchen. We grew in there, outgrew that kitchen. Said, okay, let's take out the office and expand the kitchen. Did that. A year later, like, okay, we outgrew this kitchen. And then we opened up a new production facility. It's 6,500 square feet, runs 24 hours a day. And we said, okay, we'll never outgrow this. And here we are like, oh my God, if we keep going at this rate, we're going to outgrow it in a year or two. So when it comes to kind of market size and judging that and how do you navigate that, don't ask me because I've been horrible at it. And so we're really trying to gather all the data necessary to make the best decision there. But, to your point of, well, if you go out of market, you're no longer a local company. And so for us, we say, well, not if we really let that company act as its own unit, right? Where you hire local people, you have local presence in the market, you kind of have your own marketing tactics in that market. And we think that's what's going to be successful in the long run is kind of letting each market operate as its own unit.
Yeah, so it's like if you go to Phoenix, someone's saying you're going to Phoenix, but it's like we're not treating this like Vegas. We're treating this like it's Phoenix. That's a good point, right? Because you do find a lot of business owners that they go somewhere else and then they want to treat it like maybe the home city that their first location is from, like different demographic, different people, and then they're like, why isn't this working? Like the messaging isn't working. So I think that's a really strong important point. At what point do you guys decide to, even if you have the data, like you said, it's like I've been terrible at this. We've been wrong. Vegas is obviously a very growing market, but you're still using data and not going by your gut.
Yeah, and so when you're first growing, you don't have a lot of resources to get great data, right? So you kind of fill in the blanks with assumptions. And we're now at the point where we can actually splurge and spend some money on getting some data and doing some market research. And so we're fortunate enough now that we have those resources that we didn't have before. And so for us, we kind of did some just back of the napkin calculations saying, okay, this is probably about the market size. But one of the big assumptions that we got wrong was who our customer was. And that's what really, I think, helped us expand here and is basically saying, everybody needs to eat. Everyone wants to eat healthy, and everyone wants food that tastes good. And
Right.
we really pride ourselves in kind of taking traditional food, comfort food, things like that, and then just remaking it with a healthy twist. That's what people want. They don't want chicken, broccoli, and rice,
Right. That's that easy to make. But when how important is it getting data from your customers of like if they enjoy food, if they don't enjoy food, and you mentioned Beau, Chef Beau is pretty gung ho about some stuff, and then you put a dish out. Has that ever happened? Like you put a dish out and like no one buys it, no one likes it.
100%, especially in the beginning.
Yeah.
Oh my God. So anytime we take anything off the menu, because we're always rotating it, we always get angry phone calls. Doesn't matter what it is. And really early in the beginning, we were testing the market, and we're like,
Don't touch my bolognese.
oh my God, it's insane.
Yeah.
We've actually contract made some meals so someone could buy a couple hundred of them and freeze them. Like that's how much they didn't want this meal to come off the menu. But in the early days, we're like, let's see how far we can push the envelope. We're just trying to get data, what people like. And we kind of came up with this somewhat obscure, I think it's a South American dish, like a black bean soup as a breakfast. And so we put it on the menu. I think we sold maybe like 7 a week. Did not sell. No one bought it. Said, okay, obviously we pushed the envelope too far. It's not familiar enough to people. So we took it off the menu. First thing I walk in the next morning, I get this angry phone call. Where is the black bean soup? I'm like, oh, that rotated off the menu. She goes, I had that every morning for breakfast, and you took it off. Like, now what am I going to do? I'm like, you were the only one buying it.
You were the one that got the 7 meals. Yeah.
So yeah, it has happened.
Gertrude, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Oh man, it's But people are fanatical about some of these dishes. It's crazy. I mean, it's flattering, not so much to me, more for the chef. But yeah, we have some kind of, I guess, cohorts that are fanatics about certain types of dishes.
Do you ever? I was gonna say, like, just to kind of like piggyback on that. Do you guys ever use the customer data to actually change your approach? Right. I know that's one thing a lot of companies like. I don't want to get like data. Like, what if it's not good? And it's like, well, that's kind of the whole point. It's to, like, improve your product. But like, do you guys actually take any feedback you have from customers? Not like stuff like that where it's like I'm the only one eating the meals, but like, all right,
here's the
like,
recipe, Gertrude.
Yeah,
just
like,
get out of my face.
Versus like, all right, here's the theme that we're getting. Like, our delivery time isn't great, or X, Y, Z. Like, do you guys ever use that to make any decisions as it relates directly to the business?
Oh, 100% all the time. And I think customer data is the best data. So when we're developing new recipes or new dishes, we'll do kind of a Sweet 16 kind of bracket system. We'll actually put it on social media, like, what should we be working on next? Right. And all the dishes advance. And then sure enough, the last one, I think that one was a honey garlic chicken, right? That's what people wanted. And so then we say, okay, chef, go at it. Right. And then he gets to work on it for however long it takes him to develop the dish. Sometimes he gets it, good in a couple weeks. Sometimes it takes 2 months, but eventually we'll come out with it. So I think, customer data is some of the best data. We have a really good relationship with our customers, which is really good because when we make mistakes, they let us know, but they don't hold it against us. Well, not usually.
Yeah.
And
Gertrude seemed pissed.
Gertrude, she's a little angry.
Black bean soup.
Yeah.
I'm burning the place down.
But people are open with us, and they'll call us and say, hey, I love you guys. By the way, though, this thing is not for me. And one thing we recently started doing was giving out meals to people in the store, saying, hey, here's something we're working on. Go take it home and scan the barcode on the meal and tell us what you think so we can further develop this meal. And though we don't, have any sort of incentive for them to do so except for getting the meal, but we can't track who we gave it to and if they're actually filling out the form. But more than half the people that get that meal actually go on and give us really good input on it.
That's nice.
Do you ever get some like weird, like repugnant, like responses?
All the time.
Oh,
Yes.
Like, I wouldn't feed this to my dog. Like,
Well,
Andrew,
no, we don't get that bad.
Like
but we get a lot of contradictions. Like they'll say, something like, oh, it says in the title that it's hot, but it wasn't that spicy. And then it's like, what did you dislike about the dish? Say, it was too spicy. I'm just like, what's going on here?
Gosh, are you related to Gertrude?
Yeah.
Is that your mom?
No. Yeah. It's so we don't get like things that are really, this is horrible, because obviously we're not going to test something that we think is horrible.
Yeah.
And one of our rules is we only carry items and make food that we eat ourselves. So even like our snacks and drinks, everything in there is stuff we all eat ourselves. And we've had people, companies come to us and say, hey, I'll pay you a ridiculous amount of money for me to put my product on your shelf and you sell it. And we'll try it. And if it's not good, we say no, right? It doesn't matter. Our customers trust us. They trust us to make really good decisions kind of on their behalf. And when they come in, they don't want to have to read labels and do those things. and they want to make sure it tastes good, and that's that's the foodie and the foodie fit.
I'd like to kind of switch gears with you here a little bit. Entrepreneur, co-founder. I know we've been really diving into this, but you've done a lot of investing too as well. And is it in that same lane as far as like being in food, or are you diversified into other areas? And do you have like an approach when you're investing or looking at deals personally?
Yeah, so personal investments, I only stick to stuff I know. I'm a really boring investor. A lot of industrials. I only invest in things I understand. When it comes to the business, right? Like one of the things a CEO needs to do is capital allocation, right? And where is the money best spent for the best return? And some of those things are really hard to quantify because if I'm investing in the brand image, right? I don't know what that effect's going to be, and so it's really kind of taking a balanced approach as far as kind of using that OKR model, right? Okay, what's the outcome I want? What are the key results going to get there? If I don't know the key results, I have to find something to measure against. And so as a capital allocator inside the business, we act very conservatively because we know food is hard. And we kind of did case studies of all the other companies that have kind of come before us and failed. And one of the things we found is they grew too fast. They didn't grow into their infrastructure fast enough, and they essentially ran out of money. So we have a kind of conservative approach, and it's a strict formula of calculating that ROI. And so the best analogy I can give when it comes to investing is, and I tell this to everybody, you can make a bad bet, right? And we have to look at the business as like a game of poker when you make bets. If you are going to go all in, you better make damn sure you have the best hand, right? But you can make little bets all day long. But at the end of the day, it's, do you have more chips than you started with? And so we really try to instill that, saying, okay, it's okay to fail, right? If the stakes aren't that big. And as the decision gets more impactful in the business, the amount of clarity and assurance you need that that's the right decision needs to go up. And so we would say making decisions is a two-step process, right? It's gathering data and then making a decision.
Did you? So I know you mentioned Ray Dalio a little bit earlier. Were there other investors that you also follow? I know like Warren Buffett just retired recently. He's
I put him on a pedestal. Yeah, I mean, from an investment standpoint, right? That's a great example of a CEO who is a master in capital allocation, right? And that was really his strength. And you can look at different CEOs; they really have the things that they're known for, right? The Jack Welch is the operator, and you have Warren Buffett, who's the capital allocator, and that was his strength. He was brilliant at it. He's just a pragmatic guy, and so I do look up to him as far as kind of him taking a pragmatic approach to things. I do value Ray Dalio because he does a lot of research, and he was kind of one of the first ones in that space to use AI, right, in how they make decisions. Those two guys I put on a pedestal pretty high in my eyes.
Warren Buffett, so lazy retiring at 94.
I know.
What a bum,
Give me a break.
dude.
Just
God,
hang out with
Warren.
your wife for the next 5.
Get back in there, Warren.
But no, I mean, like you said, it's different approaches, and I think the one thing, and you had mentioned this like earlier too, is like being able to, and I feel like this is what these guys do at a really high level, is leverage, like creating leverage, right? Whether it's leveraging resources, talent, people. Has that been important for you? Outside of just building systems and all, like how do you look at creating leverage around just opportunities, people, or resources that you have available?
Yeah, that's something, kind of as a newer CEO, I'm still getting used to, right? So when I first kind of took over this role, was maybe a year and a half ago, I was really in the weeds of the business, right? And so as we've grown over the past year and a half, it's one thing I'm still working on myself, right? Of how do I leverage my time, right? The impact I'm having. And what I've really learned, it comes down to kind of trust, right? You need to trust the people around you, both in their ability, but also kind of in their vulnerability. And if you have those things, then you are trusting yourself enough to leverage their talents and let them kind of be an extension of you. But that's one of the hardest things I think about kind of becoming a new CEO is you feel like you want to do everything. But obviously there's only so many hours in a day. And what I've come to realize is sometimes I'm the constraint on the business, right? I'm involved in too many things, which is slowing things down. And so I need to get out of the way of everyone else sometimes. And so that's kind of one of the biggest things I've learned over especially the last 6 months is sometimes the best thing I can do is get out of the way and let those systems play out and let the people I trust execute and leverage their time, their resources, and things like that.
How is, because you mentioned you do a lot of self-reflection,
Mhm.
obviously you mentioned journaling multiple times, so it's definitely important for you. How important has personal development been in terms of becoming a better CEO?
No, it's instrumental. So I hate reading. I despise it, but I love learning. And so I actually have like kind of on my calendar every day. I force myself to read because I'm running into new situations I've never dealt with before. And so usually my reading curriculum is around the things I'm having trouble with, right? And so we actually one of our values is passion for progress in the company, and that's with our customers as well as our employees. And we're a small company. We don't have Harvard MBAs knocking down the door to work at Foodie Fit, so we really have to focus on developing the people that we have. For me, I do that through reading, and I don't like reading, but the joy of learning something new has to outweigh the burden of reading it.
Yes.
And I've come to realize that so much of my thought process and how I think things should be done was just wrong. I think reading is one of those things where you can borrow the lessons from those brilliant people in the world without having to go through the same mistakes they did. And that's probably one of the most important things.
Do you find that more entrepreneurs and more people need to get a systemized passion for their own self-development?
Yeah, I think
It's like not enough sometimes, huh?
it's critical. And so, one of the things that I did to kind of even help talking about leverage that was I hired a business coach. So I have a CEO coach. He had his own food startup, ended up selling it for hundreds of millions of dollars. He's in the same space, has an MBA in I think food and agriculture. Really smart guy, and even the best players in the world need a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a kind of two-prong approach. Right, one is a self-development that is self-motivated that I pursue, as well as someone to hold me accountable for developing myself and to give me guidance if I kind of get off the rails a little bit. And that's been really important for me. And what I always tell everyone in the company is the company's growing and it's growing fast. You have two options. You can stay put or you can grow with it. And most people choose to grow with it.
Was that easy for you? Was that like an easy shoe to slip into about, getting, being on a personal development program just for yourself?
I think it stemmed from having anxiety. And I'm not one that suffers from anxiety, but I had anxiety about the business. And what I found was by educating myself on the thing that's causing me the anxiety around the business, I remain much more level-headed and I can make good decisions. And so, we're going through this big marketing kind of mix-up right now, shake-up where we're redoing our marketing strategy, relooking at the brand, building a new brand book. And so that, like, oh my God, I've never done this before. And so I got my hands on every marketing, branding, design book I could. And every day I was sitting there for 30 minutes, an hour, just reading, getting through all these books. And like, I feel better about it now because I understand it now.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think anxiety really stems from having low predictability of the future. And so for me, I think it was that anxiety caused by that really forced me to want to develop myself.
It's interesting because it's actually what we notice is quite the opposite with entrepreneurs in general. Like when they're dealing with anxiety from something, they don't always want to. It's like that same with Bruce Lee. Like you want to embrace it. You want to get one with your issue.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only way you're going to overcome it. They'll pull away. They'll turn over to alcohol. They'll turn into vices, other things, and actually diving into that. And it's really refreshing to see someone that's like, no, it'll pass. I just need to understand it a little bit better, and just dive into some more reading, get more knowledgeable, get into some literature, and that anxiety starts to quail away.
Yeah, well, I always say don't Dunning-Kruger myself, right? So I will study the topic until I feel stupid about it. Then I know I'm in a good spot, right? So I make sure I just don't read like one book and think I know everything about marketing, right? That's a horrible way to operate. Because when you first learn something, your own self-assessment, how much you know about that thing is, super elevated. So kind of my general rule is
I am a god.
I mean, that's why you get people that read like one article on Facebook and they think they're a neuroscientist.
I'm an expert.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I know everything what's going on in Europe right now.
It's
Step
crazy.
aside, son.
And so I kind of, have an ism and is, don't Dunning-Kruger yourself. And so I really will just study something until I feel stupid about it. Like, oh my God, I don't know anything. Like, okay, at least I have a fair assessment of how much I know. And then I will basically study that thing until I'm comfortable, with it and I don't have anxiety about it.
Mm-hmm.
Man, that was good. What is like the ultimate vision for the company? Like you guys are growing. We've talked a little bit about like some expansion ideas. Like what do you see as like over the next X amount of years? You're like, this is the big fat vision I have for this company.
Yeah, I mean, from a metric standpoint, kind of the goal is to have a $100 million company in 10 years.
Okay.
We've mapped that out by saying, okay, if we have a good presence in every major market kind of in the West, that goal will be accomplished. And so, looking at right now, we opened our 3rd store last year, and we're really making sure before we take the next step and go into a new market that we have all of our ducks in a row, that we have the branding down, the operations down. And so really this year, we're not focused on growth this year. It's really about making sure the systems are solid and that we can duplicate it. And so for us, kind of the next step is either one, we will continue to expand in Vegas, or if we think, okay, the market size is good here, we have enough of the market, then we're going to look at a new market to open in. And so most companies that are competitors that have brick and mortar are doing it on the East Coast. They're kind of using that Walmart mentality of, every 100 miles, a new store, a new town. You don't have that luxury in the West. Everything's so spread apart. And so for us is we're going to kind of have to dive head into a new market and go all in, because we can't rely on, kind of the word of mouth traveling from this small market to the next one. So for us, it's every kind of major market in the West is what we're aiming for.
How can people get in contact with you if they want to hit you up, work with you, or just connect with Foodie Fit or anything else you got going on? What's the best way to connect with you?
I live and die by email. One of the things I realized coming to the CEO role was half my time is spent in meetings. So if and I love actually helping other people in this space as well. People actually will reach out to me on Instagram all the time and say like, oh, hey, I have a meal prep company in the Midwest. You guys look like you're doing really well. Like, do you have any advice? I will give them advice openly. So email is always the best way to get a hold of me. Andrew@foodiefit.com. Our Instagram handle is @foodiefitmealprep. You can follow us, ask questions. We actually have a good kind of sourcing thing there where if someone chimes in, it gets the inquiry or question, the chat gets sorted to the right person. And then obviously on foodiefit.com.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We learned a lot, and it was a pleasure.
Phenomenal.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Yep.
Thanks so much, guys. Appreciate it.